They say every love story begins with laughter, with the promise of forever, and with the belief that nothing could ever break what feels unshakable. Ours was no different. From the outside, people saw us as the couple everyone envied. We had the house with warm lights glowing through the curtains, dinners together on most evenings, and smiles for photographs that painted us as a picture of perfection. Friends often remarked how lucky we were, how rare it was to find such harmony in today's restless world. But what no photograph captured, what no smile revealed, was the silence that had slowly settled between us. In the beginning, conversation was endless, midnight talks, shared dreams, promises whispered over coffee. But as the years stretched on, routine quietly replaced passion. Our words shrank to reminders and updates, bills to be paid, errands to be done, schedules to be managed. The spark that once lit up the nights had dimmed into a faint glow, fragile and easy to overlook. He, my husband, was kind, dependable, and devoted to his work. His long hours at the office became an unspoken sacrifice for our comfort, for the life we had built together. And I, in return, tried to convince myself that this was enough, that love was meant to evolve into companionship, that security mattered more than excitement. Yet there were evenings when the clock ticked too loudly, when I sat across from an empty chair at dinner, when the echo of loneliness filled the room more than any silence should. I told myself not to complain. After all, what right did I have? He wasn't unfaithful, he wasn't unkind. He was doing everything society expected a man to do. And yet, deep down, I craved something more: attention, intimacy, the feeling of being truly seen. The kind of connection that makes your heart race, that makes you feel alive. Still, life went on smoothly enough. Birthdays were remembered, anniversaries marked with gifts that were thoughtful, if not deeply personal. To anyone else, our marriage looked flawless. I smiled at the right moments, played the role I was supposed to play, convincing not only the world but also myself that this was happiness. But sometimes, when he was too tired to look me in the eyes, when he kissed my forehead instead of my lips, a question whispered in the back of my mind: was this really all love was meant to be? I didn't dare answer it. I buried it under chores, conversations with friends, and endless distractions. Yet, like a small crack in glass, it grew silently, waiting for the moment it would finally shatter everything. And then came that night. It began as nothing more than another evening in a long line of ordinary evenings. The sky was painted with the soft hues of twilight, the air heavy with calm. I didn't know it then, but by the time the sun rose again, my life, and everything I thought I knew about love, would never be the same. Loneliness has a way of creeping in quietly, slipping through the cracks when you least expect it. It doesn't announce itself loudly, it waits for the moments when you feel unseen, unheard, and then it settles into your heart like an unwelcome guest. That's how it began for me. It was an ordinary afternoon. He had texted to say he'd be late again, another meeting, another project, another excuse I had grown used to hearing. I told myself it didn't matter, that I'd fill the evening with a book or a movie. But as I scrolled through my phone, a name lit up on the screen, one I hadn't seen in years. "Thinking of you. Hope you're well." It was Daniel, an old friend from college. We hadn't spoken in ages, but the message stirred something inside me, something I didn't want to admit. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitation wrestling with curiosity. In the end, loneliness won. I replied. What started as casual catching up soon flowed into long conversations, about work, life, the small disappointments and secret dreams we kept hidden from others. Unlike my husband, Daniel listened, not with half an ear, not distracted, but with an attentiveness that made me feel important again. His words carried warmth, and with every exchange, I felt a version of myself awakening. The version I had buried. We decided to meet for coffee. It felt harmless at first. Just two old friends reconnecting. But when I walked into that cafe and saw him waiting, smiling as though the years hadn't passed, my heart skipped in a way I hadn't felt in so long. He noticed the little things, my new haircut, the tiredness in my eyes, the way I stirred my coffee absent-mindedly. Things my husband hadn't mentioned in months. Laughter came easily between us. I found myself leaning in, eager for more, forgetting the clock on the wall, forgetting the responsibilities waiting for me at home. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen, truly alive. But with that aliveness came guilt. Each time I returned home, I rehearsed my excuses in my head, why I was late, why I seemed distracted. He never questioned much. Perhaps he trusted me too deeply, or perhaps he was too absorbed in his own world to notice. Either way, his silence gave me the space to continue. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the windows of Daniel's car, he reached out and brushed my hand. It was such a small gesture, yet it carried the weight of everything unspoken between us. My breath caught, torn between pulling away and leaning closer. The choice lingered in the air, fragile and dangerous. I knew, in that moment, that the line between friendship and something more was fading fast. I should have stopped, I should have turned away. But temptation has a voice of its own, and it whispered louder than my conscience. That was the night I stopped being just lonely. That was the night I stepped onto the path I could never walk back from. Nights have a way of holding secrets tighter than the day ever could. The city outside was alive with lights, but inside that quiet apartment, time felt suspended. Daniel and I hadn't planned it, at least that's what I kept telling myself, but deep down, I knew every choice, every unanswered warning in my heart, had led us here. The evening began simply enough. He had invited me over for dinner, insisting it was nothing more than food and conversation. I told myself the same story as I stood before the mirror, choosing a dress with more care than I had in years. My reflection stared back at me with questions I couldn't answer. When I arrived, the table was set with candles flickering gently, casting shadows that danced across the walls. Soft music hummed in the background, the kind of music that fills silence without demanding attention. It should have felt innocent. But it didn't. We ate, we laughed, and yet, beneath every word lingered a tension we both pretended not to notice. My phone buzzed once, my husband's name lighting up the screen. I silenced it quickly, telling myself I would call him later. I didn't want reality intruding into this fragile illusion. After dinner, we moved to the couch. A storm had gathered outside, raindrops tapping urgently against the glass, as if warning me to stop. But warnings mean little when your heart is already set on ignoring them. Daniel's hand brushed against mine, hesitant at first, then firmer, as though testing the waters of my silence. I didn't pull away. The room grew heavy with unspoken words. I could hear my own heartbeat louder than the rain. And then, without asking, without thinking, he leaned in. His lips touched mine softly, almost cautiously, as though waiting for me to resist. I didn't. Instead, I let go, of guilt, of reason, of promises I had once sworn to keep. The kiss deepened, and with it, the world outside ceased to exist. In those moments, I wasn't a wife, I wasn't bound by duty. I was simply a woman who had forgotten what it felt like to be wanted. Yet even as passion drowned out doubt, a voice inside whispered of betrayal, of consequences that would surely follow. But I silenced it, convincing myself this was a secret the night would hold forever. When it was over, silence filled the room again, but it wasn't the comforting silence of companionship. It was thick, suffocating, a silence that carried guilt on its shoulders. Daniel smiled faintly, reaching for my hand, but the weight in my chest made it hard to breathe. On the drive home, the streets blurred under the rain. My phone buzzed again, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. My hands gripped the wheel tightly, as though holding on to control I no longer had. That night had changed everything. The line I once swore I would never cross now lay far behind me, invisible in the darkness. And though the world remained unaware, I knew deep inside, there was no turning back. Morning light has a cruel way of exposing what the night tries to conceal. When I opened my eyes the next day, everything around me looked the same walls, the same life, the same familiar rhythm. Yet, inside me, nothing was the same anymore. I drove home that morning in silence, watching the world outside move as if nothing had changed. But something had. I had crossed a line I could never uncross. The guilt was heavy, pressing down on every breath. My husband greeted me with a tired smile when I walked through the door, his eyes soft, his trust unbroken. And in that moment, the weight of my betrayal felt unbearable. Days passed, but I was no longer myself. I carried the secret like a shadow that never left. He noticed my distance, of course, he did. The way my eyes avoided his, the way my laughter seemed forced, the way silence stretched longer than it used to. He asked once, gently, "Is something wrong?" I shook my head, offering a smile I didn't mean. But his eyes lingered, searching, as if deep down he already knew. Every time my phone lit up with a message from Daniel, my chest tightened. I told myself I could end it, that it had been just one night, a mistake, a moment of weakness. But temptation doesn't disappear, it lingers, waiting, reminding. And guilt doesn't fade, it grows, carving deeper scars into the soul. One evening, I found him, my husband, sitting quietly at the dining table, his phone in his hand. The look on his face told me everything before he even spoke. He had seen the messages. His voice was calm, almost too calm, when he asked, "How long?" There are no words strong enough to mend a heart breaking in front of you. I tried to explain, to apologize, to confess that I had felt lonely, unseen, forgotten. But how could loneliness ever justify betrayal? His silence was louder than my tears, his stillness sharper than any anger. That night, our home, once warm and familiar, felt like a stranger's house. We slept in the same bed, but miles apart, the chasm between us too wide to cross. Some stories end with forgiveness, others with endings that tear everything apart. Ours was somewhere in between. We didn't separate immediately, but the trust, once broken, never truly healed. Every word, every glance, carried the echo of what I had done. Answer: life went on, but differently. We became two people living under the same roof, bound by memories but divided by betrayal. And I, trapped between regret and longing, understood the price of that one night. They say infidelity isn't just about what happens behind closed doors, it's about the promises broken, the innocence lost, the love that once felt unshakable now fragile and cracked. And as I look back, I know this with certainty, that night changed everything. Forever.